And so we are speaking about the very good news that you are whole and perfect just as you are, that you are freedom itself, that the light of divine wholeness is in your heart and it already knows itself. And the grace is that everything that seems to bind is an opportunity to see where there is a sense of being stuck or held, and to be so present with this holding until it gently releases into the shining, radiant light of being that is already ever present in the heart as itself, as yourself. So in truth, there is nothing to get, nothing to understand, and nothing to achieve in any way. It's about recognizing where this glorious light is shining within and staying in the radiant aura of your own true natural being. And recognizing then with ease that if there is something that feels stirred, then it is an opportunity, a graced opportunity to be so fully present with whatever that energy is that feels stirred and allow it to gently release. There is no doing involved in any of this. And the mind makes it so complicated. The mind attempts to strategize, born out of its innocent, learned habit to protect. And so in a way, this whole unfolding is about undoing, unlearning, letting go. And so the natural radiant light of true nature can shine in every heart because it is already here, shining in every heart. And it does not matter what the mind says. It does not matter if the mind says, well, I don't feel it. It doesn't feel like my experience. It doesn't matter because the light shines on, because the light is eternal. It's an eternal radiant flame that has never even been lit. So how could it ever be extinguished or dimmed? The light of radiant wholeness is always, always on, and it is always guiding you into yourself. And that is the glory, that the light is always on. The light is always on. And so it is to find the light that is always on and be guided by that light into yourself. Where the light is always on is here now, in this moment, in the presence of being, in the simple existence that just is. That it doesn't matter what is going on in the mind or on the surface of life. It's just to let go and not let that be relevant. Let the pull of what is true, calling you into yourself, be the priority. Surrender everything to the one. Surrender everything to the one, not even knowing what that one is. Because in truth, that one is yourself. That the one is the light that is shining within. And this is all about remembering that who you are is the radiant light that is shining within and without, and that you do not need to do anything in order to be yourself. And yet every place, every moment where there feels to be entanglement or challenge is this opportunity to release what seems to be holding and recognize that what seems to be holding isn't really holding anything, and to really find out, is there actually anything there that's holding or binding? Is there really actually any separation in truth? Not conceptually, what the mind thinks. And so we have to explore and discover that without thought, what is actually here? It is this invitation to discover the reality that is here, and that reality is boundless. Reality is all-inclusive. Reality is unconditional. Reality is just this, with no overlay or imposition upon this. No thinking or conditioning that evaluates this, judges this, has an opinion about this, has a preference about this. It's just about this. To live from this, in this, as this, is to live in the freedom that is the true nature. And so every place in the life that feels to be stuck or binding in some way, holding stress or upset in some way, all of these places are graced opportunities to illuminate and bring the warmth of your radiant true presence, the love of your true compassionate, patient, caring nature to everything that feels like a disturbance. And so that everything can be held naturally and allowed to surface. How would you move? What would you say if you were not afraid? How would you move? What would you say if you were not in fear and held in patterns of old stress that are afraid of creating a disturbance, afraid of losing love, afraid of change? It becomes such a tricky edge, because when the heart is called to freedom, when the heart is called to itself, everything will conspire to bring you to yourself. And then often what happens is that resistance comes to the places that are being offered in support of your great longing, in support of your noticing that there's a momentum for freedom. And your momentum for freedom will touch the beings around you, and it will ask every being around you to have to meet themselves. And it is only the ego sense that is afraid that would stop the natural momentum of divine grace being able to unfold and allow you to meet yourself fully, and allow every being in your story to meet their own self. And so this protection that we have, it's a protection from the old conditioned fears, feeling the fears, meeting the fears, a fear of change, a fear of the unknown. What will happen if you say what you want to say? What will happen if you move in truth and alignment? And then the graced opportunity to meet all of the feelings that come up when the courage comes to move from freedom. You know, in truth, when we move in truth, it's never the way the mind anticipates. The mind anticipates because the mind is past. The mind is memory. And so within the mind says, I can't say that, I can't do that, I can't move in that way because this is what will happen. It starts to make future predictions, and it's really just a dance of fear. But you know, in truth, when there's a movement from truth in openness that actually speaks and moves from an openness, like a fearlessness, and takes the risk to say what feels true in absolute openness and vulnerability, it can often be quite amazing how that truth is received, because there's one truth, and that one truth is the truth of all. There's one wholeness, one light, one being, one God, one, only one. And so when there's alignment with the one, it's inviting every being in our storyline to align with that one. And it's really about having the courage and sincerity and conviction in the one to move from the one as the one, and to allow every being to have to meet whatever they have to meet as a consequence. Now, consequence is karma. Consequence is cause and effect. And this whole unfolding is about freedom from karma, freedom from cause and effect. And when we come to recognize the being and to know that the same radiant light of being is shining as wholeness already inside every being, we come to trust in the deepest way that every being has the same light within. Every being has the same impulse for freedom within. Every being has the same ability to meet their ego patterns and conditioning. And who are we to rob anybody of that opportunity to meet themselves and to meet their stresses and fears and upsets in order to come to a possibility of freedom in this lifetime? The grace of a human life has only one true purpose, and that true purpose is to know yourself, to free yourself from mind, free yourself from what the mind imagines is binding and hooking, and meet every edge that seems to be holding some kind of containment or limitation, in order to recognize the freedom that you are. Who would you be if there were no consequences to you moving in truth? How would you move? What would life look like? What would you say? And then to notice what stops you. What actually stops you? Is it a feeling inside? Can you meet that feeling inside that stops you moving from truth? Can you be present, so fully present with the feeling inside? Can you say no to the play and the perpetuating of the same old, same old? Can you listen to the depth of your own heart and the consciousness that knows the truth already, and align so deeply with that, fearlessly, knowing that if you align with truth, that truth is true for all beings, and whatever the seeming consequences are of your alignment, that it can only be truth. If you are aligned with truth, then the consequence can only be truth, and that is surrender to the one. It's not the same as the consequences of cause and effect, because cause and effect, karma, is a binding story, a binding narrative that's based on desire. And it's the desire for the me to stay alive. And when we stop the desire for the me to stay alive, and we're willing to surrender that whatever feels true is true movement, that the only consequence can be the love of God. The only consequence can be truth. When you can feel the alignment with truth, and you can feel that the only consequence can be truth, then there's this steadfastness to rest in this truth and just to allow the readjusting. It's like a spine or a body that's out of alignment, that if you allow the natural realigning, it can only be one way, right? You allow the alignment, the natural realigning, and whatever impact that has, the impact is grace. And the knowing of that comes when there's this inner surrender that says, only truth, only truth, only truth, only freedom, only freedom, only freedom, right? It's this willingness to let go of the me and my desires and my preferences and what I want, and to let all of that subside into wanting only truth, wanting only freedom, wanting only the glory of God to shine in your heart, in the knowing of itself, to allow the radiance of this knowing that is already ever present within to actually be able to shine. And that when we align with this truth, whatever happens, whatever falls away is grace. Whatever falls away is grace itself. Mm. Mm. So sometimes we speak of the longing or the pull, and the mind says, well, I don't really identify with that word. I don't really recognize that. But the truth is, what are you doing here? Why are you here? What brings you here? And to not even listen to the mind that wants to come in and really try to sabotage, because the mind is a saboteur, right? It's an interceptor, it's a saboteur, and it is constantly going to attempt to sabotage the pull to this freedom. And the question really is that going to be allowed? Is that okay? Will that do, right? Is the pull of the heart greater? Is the pull for freedom, for truth, great enough to stop the constant attempts of sabotage coming in? Is the pull for this freedom strong enough to stop the sabotaging of the mind continuing to perpetuate? And this question is your inner inquiry, right? It's an invitation to inquire within. And you know, the mind starts to imagine, because the mind is dramatic, it starts to imagine, oh, then I'm going to have to leave my job, leave my relationship, I'm going to have to let go of all these things. And it's not true. That is not what's being asked. That's, again, that is the mind sabotage. The sabotage of the mind is how the mind constantly brings in something adverse that's going to happen if you listen to the call of truth of your heart. But it's not actually how this works at all. It's not how it works. Yes, there has to be a willingness for things to change and realign into natural order. But the realignment of natural order doesn't take everything away. It changes according to what is supportive and aligned for the divine to shine on the surface of life, essentially, because this is not a personal unfolding. It's nothing to do with the me and the mine and the personal sense of getting something. The whole unfolding is for the whole, as the whole. And that's why this surrender is the willingness to give it all up for the whole, to actually give up the personal for the impersonal, unlimited, to give up the idea of me and my quest, my awakening, my spiritual journey, and recognize that all of that is really New Age mumbo jumbo. And we have to be willing to surrender the New Age mumbo jumbo, because the New Age mumbo jumbo is actually one of the great obscurations to true spirituality being allowed to dawn on the surface of life. because the New Age, it's well-intentioned, but it's a partial truth, and it allows us to get trapped in ego pleasantries and spiritual moods that are not truth. And so we have to be willing to lay the vehicles that have offered us grace on the path. We have to be willing to let them go, offer them at the altar of truth, offer all that doesn't serve in this moment at the altar of truth. And that is the willingness to let go of all ideas of what the right way is, to behave this way, what love is, what integrity is, because the New Age has created definitions for these words that are not actually truth. They're about the ego dwelling in itself and interacting in ways that hold a sense of protection. And that's not truth. Now, the truth, the pure love and compassion, it's kind and patient and loving beyond what any spiritual mood can imagine. And yet it's also honest. It's honest. Now, true love is so honest, and most beings are actually not used to honesty, are not used to being loved enough, not used to being in the presence of love that is wholesome, and so not used to honesty, a radical love that is actually honest, right? So what if you were to dwell in radical love that is actually honest, and you had the courage to be honest? And being honest isn't about moving in any other way than a way that is true for you, right? It's not about dabbling in anyone else's business. It's about speaking and moving in a way that is true for you, that you express what feels true for you, that you express what feels true, and you move in what feels true for you, right? This is a radical love. This is a radical honesty. It's a radical simplicity. It's a radical truth as far as the mind is concerned, because the mind is containment. The mind is limitation. It's not truth, right? And this is the whole thing that we have to see through, is that anything that the mind says is not the truth, that the only truth is the direct experience of being here now and the felt sense of presence that is true because it's here now. It's true because it's known in the knowing of itself here now. Nothing else is true. Nothing else matters. And we can't explain to the mind in a way that the mind understands, because the mind only knows limitation. And we cannot explain the unlimited within the context of limitation. It's impossible. But we can come to the felt sense of the unlimited in the open, unbounded presence here now, the simple, silent being that just is. And we can feel the openness and the naturalness of just being. And here we don't have to wonder anything, because we cannot explain what this is going to be like in the future, because there's only here now. The closest we could offer is, it's going to be like this. It's always going to be like this. It's always just going to be this. This openness, this freedom, this love, this clarity, this truth. It's always going to be this, because there is nothing else. And we could maybe say, and all that is lost is your suffering. All that is lost is your stress. All that is lost is what doesn't serve, this truth. Everything that serves this truth, everything that is in service fully to the whole and functioning in the momentum of the flow of the whole, it remains. Because you see, your whole life is a setup. It's things have already been put in place in service to the whole. So it's not that everything gets wiped clean, blank canvas, you're all by yourself, no belongings, no family, no friends, no relationships, no job, no home, nothing. You're just suddenly just standing there with a loincloth and a begging bowl. That's not what happens, right? You don't find yourself just jettisoned to a cave in the Himalayas. You find that, oh boy, everything's still here. Oh boy, family, they're still here, right? You find everything's exactly the same, right? Everything's the same. What's changed is your perspective of seeing it, that you're no longer afraid, that you're no longer the person in the story, in the drama, right? It's like you were a movie character and suddenly you're not that character in the movie anymore. You're here as the witness of that. And yet the character in the movie is still moving, but it's now being animated by like a pure vital life force. It's like the puppet has got more of a pure vital life force animating it, because the what's that word? Limiting flow has released. And so there's more of a free flow. And yet it takes a while for the residues to wind down. And that's the grace of refinement, where everything gets met. Everything has the possibility of being met. And so when something arises, it's really this invitation to say, okay, here's a stress. Which way are you going to go? Are you going to choose freedom, or are you going to choose the saboteur? Are you going to choose freedom or the saboteur? Right? It's up to you. You feel like you have free will. And in a way, the grace of feeling like you have free will is to allow the feelings of, oh, I don't know which way to go. I don't know. But in truth, you don't really even have free will, because you're one with the whole, and consciousness is moving everything. But those feelings that come up, that feel like you're on an edge, which way am I going to go? Freedom or sabotage? Freedom or sabotage, right? The feeling of that in itself is a glorious moment for the stress of the nervous system to unwind, right? To feel like you have free will. We have neither free will or destiny in truth, right? All of that is just fodder for the mind to contemplate and waste time on. Because in truth, there's one, here now, here now, here now. Only this, only this. Nothing to resist, nothing to choose, just this, right? So will you play the game of chance, of choice, of resistance? Will you resist? What arises? And this is where it's this grace to be able to stay present with any situation. It's a game. It's like a game. And you're moving around the board and you land on a square where something has to happen. And on that square, here, oh, resistance. Do I have a choice? What will I choose? Freedom? Will the saboteur come in? I don't know what to decide. I feel all this stress. I feel fear. I feel anxiety. It's just that you're in a game. The way to deal with the game is to be here now and to meet all of the sensation and aliveness in your nervous system. Because one thing that's really important is you're in the game and there's no one else here except you. You imagine you've created other players, but no one else is here except you. So your experience is your internal unique experience. It's not necessarily the other player's experience. And you are alone with your experience. So don't even try to bring anyone into it. Be alone with your experience. Be true in your experience. And in the game, move from that truth. You're being tested. And in a way, that test isn't a test where you get marked and evaluated, but it is a little bit maybe like a game of snakes and ladders. but you don't really go down or go backwards, except in your direct experience, you might have those kind of heavy feelings. And you don't really go upwards. You just open to your own openness, right? So no one else is involved. No one is marking. No one is watching. It's your game. It's your game. It's your unfolding, your refinement. No one else is involved. And so when there's a fear of, oh, if I say this, if I move in this way, what will that player do? It doesn't matter what that player does, because it's just like in a computer game. You know, you see something on the path, you bang it on the head, right? Doesn't matter. It looks like it explodes, but it's just a visual on a screen. Let whatever happens to the player be their responsibility. You be with what's coming up in you, because so often the great way of distracting is by filling ourselves with fear of what's going to happen if I move in truth, and imagining that one's going to do this, and this is what's going to happen. And suddenly you're in a whole story. And actually all that's happening is that you're not facing your own inner feelings. You're creating a distraction through a fear of what might happen in an imagined future if you move from truth. And so really, there's no point talking about it until you actually move from truth, right? Because when you move from truth and you bang that monster on the head that's on your path, and then you've really got some feelings, right? Because the imagined feelings, it's a waste of time processing that, because that's your inner experience. So in a way, it's a waste of energy trying to process a total imagined projection within your own movie. It's a waste of energy. It's to just come to the now and be with the sensations. Really, the first instruction is be able to be present with your own inner experience and to discern where you're creating an imagined future that you're afraid of, and see that and stop that. Stop that by coming to presence, seeing it, illuminating it, and actually meeting what's happening in your nervous system, right? And if a situation arises where the movement is very quick and you feel like, well, I don't really have time to sit and be present, it's just to allow what's true to happen, right? Let the words spill out. Let it spill out. Take the risk of just spilling your beans, right? Take the risk of spilling the beans, and then you've got something to be with, right? Then, okay, the beans have been spilled. Now you've got something that's actually happening to be present with, right? Now the work happens. Now you're present with actually what's really happening when true movement is allowed, right? Then the grace is starting to realign and reconfigure. And it's just to be present and keep allowing the truth to come, the truth to come, the truth to come, right? So, of course, the mind can make so much about all of this, and it's not about any of that conceptualizing that can take place. It's this invitation to just be the presence of the moment and not be the character of the moment, and just allow whatever moves through the character to move through in truth, even if it blows its top, right? There can be so much fear of anger or some kind of expression that's a little bit wild, but let it come forward. And then you've got something to deal with, because it's the suppression that's the problem. It's the suppression and the resistance and the holding back that creates all of this fear and running in the mind with all of the what ifs and the possibilities. Stop imagining and just let the play play. It doesn't matter if anger comes forward. It doesn't matter if a fierceness comes forward. It doesn't matter if tears, sadness, if breaking down comes forward. It's all of this energy of trying to hold the dam back and control things from an imagined perspective that stops the true movement. And that true movement is the true movement for all beings. It's a whole, a holistic flow of life. And everything that happens, however wild it is for all beings. And it's really for all beings to be able to be present with their own functioning. In a way, it's exciting. Let the wildness be wild. Let life live itself. Let honesty be honest. Let the truth shine. Let love be truly alive in its unconditional presence. Let everything be truly as it is, and let go of all of the tension of trying to control and hold back the flow of life. Trust the one. Trust the one. The one is the flow of life, right? If we hold back the flow of life, what happens is that we start to manifest physical and emotional symptoms from holding back. The physiology starts to move in distorted patterns, because in a way it starts to accumulate ama, it starts to accumulate toxins, right? Because you're not digesting life. You're not fully digesting the flow. You're getting like a blocked up indigestion because there's a controlling or a holding back, right? So when you're not digesting life, you're going to start to manifest in the physiology the symptoms of indigestion on some level, right? You're going to start to manifest the symptoms, and your physiology will start to give you the message. It will start to be a messenger. Are you listening? Are you listening? Right? And if you don't listen, it will go deeper into the tissues, right? This is how dis-ease comes, right? Dis-ease comes because we're holding back and we're moving from conditioned and discordant controlled patternings. You see, it's all one. The way that it's working, it's all one. So this unfolding that gets called awakening or enlightenment is about coming to total surrender to the one in order to be the one, be one with the one, and live as the one, in accord with the one, in attunement, alignment with the naturalness of the one, right? If you're burping up life, then you want to find out what's going on. What is that indigestion? What is holding there, right? This is what we want to come up. And if, if we're burping up life and there's a burning to that, there's anger there, right? There's anger, energy, there's some kind of discordance that needs to be expressed, it doesn't have to be projected, of course, but it needs to be, right? It's got to find an outlet, because if the poor little body physiology is trying to hold all of this, it's not natural for the physiology to hold all of this, right? And so then the physiology that's holding back, don't speak. Swallow it down. Don't let it out, right? You start to see very simply why the body manifests all of these kind of particularly so prevalent digestive symptoms of imbalance, right? And of course, these kind of symptoms then start to manifest as all kinds of imbalance to moods, imbalance to sleep, imbalance to the feelings of motivation, because all of this is showing that the flow of life is impeded somehow. The flow of life, the naturalness of life is being impeded. There's imbalance. So all of this is to express that when there's a sense of imbalance in the life, stress, being hooked or bound, it's a message. It's a divine message. It's a message that says, take a look, stop, take a look. Don't try to work it out with your mind. Another way is, of course, the mind looking for the antidote or the fix. Oh, I'll try this therapy. I'll take antacids. I'll take these tablets. I'll do a cleanse. I'll do this. I'll go to this doctor. I'll go to that doctor, right? Again, all ways of distracting. Stop. Be present. Present with your own presence. Listen deeply and let the revealing of the imbalance. What is the physiology attempting to express? What is the imbalance? And what is being asked for? How is that rebalancing being invited? Right? So we're given all of these opportunities to keep rebalancing. The great imbalance of the collective is the imbalance of what might be called the masculine or the yang or the Shiva energy. Every being in the collective is carrying that imbalance. And it's an imbalance which is all about power imbalance. And it's about power and wealth and sex. And all of these are ways that the imbalance perpetuates in the collective consciousness. And so in the rebalancing, we're being invited to look at where we are bought into that imbalance, where we are bought into the power play, where we're bought into the great imbalance of wealth and accumulation, and where we're bought into the great imbalances around sexuality and the objectification of the female physiology, and not an honoring and heralding the natural yin receptive goddess, which is the mother, right? The feminine energy, which is out of balance and has been suppressed, is a receptive, open, surrendered, devoted flow of life. It's the flow of Shakti. And where that Shiva masculine imbalance of control and domination and accumulation and power and success and overpowering and objectifying is played out in the collective, we're being invited in our lived experience to notice, where do those places play out in our lived experience, and where are we being invited to rebalance and bring the rebalancing within our own lived experience in order to offer that rebalancing to the whole, and an honoring of the mother, an honoring of the receptive, open, flowing beauty that is divine wholeness. And so this is not about the male and female forms exactly. It's a rebalancing that's required in both female and male biology. And we're given this opportunity to bring this rebalancing around, right? We're given this opportunity for a rebalancing to happen by not conforming to the great imbalance, by not conforming to these imbalanced ways that life plays out, and coming to this place inside that feels like, well, this is the way society is. This is the way it's been learned. This is the way that relationships play out. This is what you have to do to get love. This is okay. It's this invitation within our functioning to say, no, no, no more of that. It's to feel the truth inside and to not allow the perpetuation and continuation, and to play our illumined part in the rebalancing in every way that we can, and to be in the consequences of karma unraveling while we rest in the consequence. Only one truth, only one truth. That we have to see through all of the ways that we even have been conditioned and learned to play out certain roles, that the masculine role of the male biology is not aligned with truth. The playing out of the female role with female biology is not the truth. We're conditioned, and our work is to come to a rebalancing where we're not playing out these roles, where we're exerting a power or we're expecting the other to behave in certain ways, that we're finding within our consciousness ways to communicate and rebalance honesty, that as male biology, we don't move in these ways of feeling like we have to suppress and exert power and have expectations. And as a female, that we're not dishonoring our physiologies, that we're honoring that the female biology is the mother consciousness in form. The female biology is the goddess. The female biology is the consciousness of the goddess, of divine wholeness. The female biology carries the full illumined consciousness of the mother in the womb and the yoni, right? Now we're speaking of the physiology, but the goddess, the mother, is carried in the female biology, right? And so the female biology has this invitation to rebalance the suppressed, imposed upon ideas that we somehow have to give this physiology to the imbalanced male principle, right? What has this got to do with awakening? Everything it has to do with awakening, because we cannot awaken to the true nature and live this truth on the surface of life if we're acting out in balance in our lives, right? We have to recognize, and in a way, the imbalance of the collective consciousness is so great that if we don't start addressing with honesty, an honesty that addresses the topics that seemingly in the collective are taboo, with openness, kindness, love, and sincerity, if we don't start bringing these topics forward, then they will stay exactly where the collective imbalance wants them to stay, which is behind closed doors, in the closet, undercover, and the imbalance will perpetuate, right? So we have to, in complete openness, love, and honesty, bring these topics forward, because every being is longing for rebalancing. And often neither biology, neither the male biology nor the female biology actually knows what it is like to live in balance, in truth, and honor the biology of our physical forms in absolute, complete surrender and devotion and balance. We don't know it because we haven't been taught it. We only come to know it when we come to the balance of knowing our true nature, an openness and an honesty and an ability to be true and communicate with openness and truth. We don't know this because we've learned imbalance. We've learned to be okay with imbalance. But imbalance is not okay. In a consciousness that is in the process of awakening, we have to address the great imbalance in every way. And power, wealth, and sex are the ways that the great imbalance continues to perpetuate. You know, the great sages spoke that if you give up money and your way of relating with the opposite sex, often because of the ancient texts, it would be spoken, give up money and women and you will be free, right? Because if you give up these desires and obsessions, freedom and natural balancing will come. And of course it applies, we could say, give up money and men. And it applies because even most females, the majority of females, are moving within the great masculine imbalance. Most females are moving in an imbalance of a great imposition of the imbalanced Shiva aspect. So this is all about opening to the flow of divine grace, the flow of receiving life, the flow of surrender, the flow of receptivity, right? Even within the great imbalance, we also really want the Shiva awakening, right? We want pure awareness, awake, now I'm awake, now I'm powerful, now I'm strong, and I want it now, right? I want it now. I want to awaken. I want to be awake, and this is the way I want it to be. Even that desire is entangled in the imbalanced principle. And that's why so much of this flow of awakening of consciousness has to be about rebalancing and more of the Shakti awakening, which is about the surrender, the devotion, the flow, the letting go, the receptivity of all of life. Because if we don't open in a balanced way, then what do we get? We get a world where there are non-dual teachers that are living in the imbalance of spiritual narcissism, right? And often those happen to be male biologies, right? We see it on the surface of life because this is the great imbalance that's happening right now. And so all of this is part of the great rebalancing. that we have to open and rebalance our lived experience in an integrated way that allows there to be an opening to this true nature, the naturalness of being, where we're not burdened with the imposition of imbalanced teachings that are interpretations of the pure truth. We have to open to a pure truth, a holistic truth that is alive and awake in every heart, regardless of the biology, right? So we have to come before gender. We have to come before everything that the life entails in roles. We have to become before being a son or a daughter, before being a brother or a sister, before being a mother or a father, right? We have to come before all of that to the clear, pure being, which is genderless, birthless, deathless, whole, right? And we want to meet in this whole openness that is love. And we want to learn to relate and communicate and be together holistically, not moving through the filters of conditioned, confined, limited relationships. And it means that your personal, seemingly personal relationships will go through the possibility of an enormous, profound upgrade if you are willing to face all of the places of imbalance where you're not exerting power and you're not expecting because of your biology, and you're not giving yourself away and dishonoring yourself and letting your body vehicle be used, abused, and violated in any way because you're afraid of losing love, that you're willing to know the love that you are and stand grounded in that love in the face of maybe consequences that might happen. And now this has everything to do with this Sangha and awakening, because you'd be surprised at how many of you are dealing with these things silently in your relationships and your lives. And that information gets fed to me, right? Honestly, openly. And how courageous and beautiful that you're willing to share these seeming silent secrets with me so that they can be moved through like a washing machine, right? Of honesty and openness, right? Where there's no judgment, where there's no condemning anyone. All movement of every being is innocent. So we're not condemning anyone. We're wanting to invite every being into the open embrace, really, of the mother. Because, you know, the female and the male, what is longed for is the embrace of the true mother. What is missing in the imbalance of the masculine is the embrace of the mother. And that's why the speaking speaks of divine wholeness as Ma, because we're missing the embrace of Ma. In truth, that Ma is not feminine, it's not female, not in any way that we know of within our lived human experience. But it gets spoken in this way because every being is longing for the full, unconditional embrace of the mother. Because the great imbalance is born out of a deep wounding within the consciousness of the human, of humanity, let's say, which was not embraced with unconditional mothering, right? And is suffering the consequences of that cut of the umbilical cord that cut the baby from the mother And then what happened as a result of that, the significance is that it represents being cut from God, from the divine, within the human experience. And then the consequences that are imagined in the mind that becomes active imagines that the cutting off is that cutting off from where the umbilical cord gets cut, and that sense of existential aloneness and severing has an impact. And then, of course, the karmas take over. So we're here to heal the human condition. We're here to heal the conditioning, the protections that keep us held and bound in separation. Because there is no separation in the divine light of wholeness in every heart. And our work is so much more than what we imagine on our seeming personal spiritual journey that says, my awakening, I want to wake up, I want to end suffering, I want enlightenment in this lifetime. It's so profound that we have this call, and that we hear the call, and that we open to the call. But the call is to open to the being, but not to transcend away from our human lived experience, because the work of transmuting and healing, transforming our human lived experience is the true work of the human life, in order to bring the great glory that we're opening to right to the surface of life, to bring Ma, the mother consciousness, right to the surface of life. And we don't bring that consciousness right to the surface of life when we are objectifying the female form or dishonoring the female form in any way, right? So all of the ways that the female is pushed down, kept silent, and dishonored is just a sign, just the same way that it's a sign. All of the ways that that kind of abuse is so huge in the collective consciousness, the ways that we dishonor Mother Nature, and we're so comfortable within the collective to dishonor. There's all the ways, the micro and the macro, and the way that we really heal and transform is by recognizing how this is so alive within our own lived experience, and that our own lived experience is an opportunity to surrender through all of the places that these kind of holdings, resistances, and movements are being played out, and to be able to open. You know, one place as well, which is a really tender place that has happened to so many male biologies, is that they were taught that their sensitivity and profound beauty in their young life, they were taught that it was somehow impaired, that they were somehow impaired for being sensitive and kind and loving. And they had these kinds of ways of the imposed masculine upon the sensitivity. And so much of the wounding can be that there's a fear and a deep held belief that I did something wrong, that I've done something wrong, or that I've somehow done something wrong or dishonored the feminine even. So many male forms hold these kind of ideas from their young life, that somehow that they are wrong in their naturalness. And so there's so many subtleties that are being held and played out. And we see on the surface in the collective consciousness how those distortions are then played out right on the surface. And so as we open to the being, as we open to the beauty, and truth of who we are, we have to bring all of these ways of moving within the collective right to the surface, right? Just as we have spoken of mental health issues and bringing this to the surface, right? All of these things have to be brought to the surface. We can't imagine that satsang is not for this. We have to recognize that the whole truth is a whole truth that includes it all, right? That we're bringing everything, all of the shame and guilt that can keep these places held in the unconscious in discordance and acting out their discordance, right? Acting out their distortions, that we have to bring these places forward so that the distortions can be brought into the light of consciousness, that the distortions can be brought into the wholeness of perfect love, whole love, and that each being already has this light that is whole and pure and innocent shining within the heart. Every being has this light shining within. And this is about bringing the attention to the light within, so that the knowing of the light within, knowing of the whole being, can allow all of the distortions in consciousness to be allowed to surface, be welcomed, and to be ironed out in the presence of true, whole, perfect love, where shame and guilt cannot be allowed to perpetuate the imbalance of separation. And it's not about telling your story and feeling like you have to, in a way, bring your shame to the surface. But what wants to come forward, of course, is always welcome. But it's not about psychological counseling or moving through on the level of the mind, trying to reprogram. It's about meeting the fact that where there's separation, there's shame and guilt. And if there's guilt and shame, that will move as projection, as a way of protecting. Now, this is the patterning of the collective consciousness, that all guilt and shame is projected. And so it's seen within the collective as normal to move with projection and complaining and blaming others, and all of the ways that these distortions are playing out. Where guilt and shame is present, we have to welcome and just bring the light to the fact that all beings are holding this guilt and shame where there's separation, and to allow it to open into a perfect love where it won't be met with defense or protection, right? Egos bounce back and forth in protection and conditioning because of a fear of what will happen. And it brings forward old feelings, old fears, old anxieties, old stresses. But it's about allowing the recognition of guilt and shame and fear and stress, so that where it is allowed, it no longer holds you captive, right? It can't hold you captive if it's not a secret, if it doesn't have to be kept a secret. If you're not harboring it and trying to create an okay appearance on the surface of life, and you're not moving in those ways to try to keep the anger. This is why we often speak that there's so much anger hidden away, because we haven't been able to express that anger. We haven't been able to express our fears. We didn't learn to communicate about what was going on inside. And so the whole life has been a confused distortion, right? And this awakening, it awakens us out of really being held captive by that distortion, that we're no longer held captive by the discordance, and that yes, we awaken to the truth and the glory and the beauty and the love and the innocence, and we already are this. But the reason that we find that we have openings and they don't seem to stick is exactly for this very reason that we're speaking of here today, is because there's so much discordance in the human life, that how can this truth come right to the surface and be lived when there's all these layers of discordance and conditioning and protection in the way, and that we imagine that when we awaken, we have to then act as some kind of mythic idea of an awakened being and just always be smiling and shining and always being in this awakeness that happened in our first opening or the openings that we've had, and that we then perpetuate our guilt and shame because behind closed doors, we're not actually as shiny as we imagine that we should be. But it's all nonsense, because it's not about putting on another appearance. It's not about acting out a mythic idea of what an awake being is. It's about actually moving through the grittiness of what life offers us until we're completely free in the face of life. We're completely free in the world, and we can bring forward the truth that we've discovered in the absolute right to the surface of life without distortion, without control, right? That we're willing to move in this freedom and to keep looking, right? Very important that we don't ever land in an imagined idea of having arrived anywhere, but that we're constantly opening and looking and opening and looking and purifying and clearing. What happens is that it moves from a sense of personal to the impersonal, to transmuting the collective, right? But you can only know and understand that as that naturally happens through your functioning. So there's no point imagining that you want to be somewhere that you're not, because what's the point? What's the point? How useful is that in the great scheme of things? You're just fooling yourself. This is an inside job. It's all about you being alone in your inner process. And yes, the grace is we create companionship, guidance, and support. But we're all in this together, right? We're unfolding as one together. We're unfolding as one together. Mm. 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 So everything is welcome. Everyone is welcome, wherever you are, however you are, because this truth does not turn away from whatever is happening on the surface of life, right? And when we speak of this truth, we speak of the Sat, that we are gathering in this truth. We're the Sang, the Sangha, and we're gathering in this Sat, in this light that is absolute truth. And that we continue to purify and purify and let go into, we allow this flow of truth. We allow this to come forward and to move as a grace that we all receive. We allow it to illuminate. We allow it to stir. We allow, through speaking to the laws of nature, for transmutation and transformation and deep healing to happen in the field that impacts our Sangha, but also impacts through the reverberations in the moving as one. It impacts the whole, that the whole of our functioning is in service to the whole, that there is only one, and this is the one, and everything is about that one, and that really this whole unfolding is about coming to the recognition and surrender, natural surrender, and complete submission to the one, so that the whole lived experience is attuned and aligned with the one that is, the one that we are one with, the one that is what is, just like this, always shining and radiant in the wholeness, and that this light is within, and where you can feel the sense of being, you can feel the knowing and the light that is already whole and pure and innocent, that you are this immaculate one, and it's shining within, and the invitation is to keep turning to the light that is already whole, and allow this light within that is the Sat Guru, the Sattva, the Sat Ma, the Sat Yam, the Sat, it's the truth within, right? That we keep turning to the Sat, to the Sat, to the Sat, so that the Sat Chit Anand can flow within our holistic lived experience, where we know the truth of who we are as Sat. We can flow as the Chit of life, the Shakti flow of life, and we can be the living bliss, the Anand, right? The Sat. In a way, the Sat could be the Shiv, the Chit could be the Shakti, and the Anand is the flow of the divine union lived, that when we come to the rebalancing of our lived experience, the truth, the flow, the pure awareness, the flow of life, the laser clarity, the flow of life, of love, and the union of that within your heart brings you to the know of being, the bliss of the divine wholeness that is. And so to drink the bliss is to drink from the wide open chalice of the mother. It's to drink the bliss of your true essence nature. It's the soma that gets spoken in the 9th mandala of the Rig Veda. It's the soma, it's the bliss. It's to drink in the bliss of your own direct experience of the union within your heart. Drink in the bliss, and to know that union is who you are, and that when you rebalance the life to remember union, that lived light, union radiance, the unified field, which is the Atman, knows itself then as Brahman and can shine in its absolute oneness on the surface of life, right? So this is what's happening. This is what's in process. And this is our invitation as we move together, flow together to come into retreat, in surrender, following the magnetic pull to be the one, in the one together, right? This is our flow. This is our invitation. This is what is carrying us to be this one together. Mm. 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 The shifting, the healing, the transformation, it doesn't happen like this. The knowing of yourself and the direct experience is this. It's spontaneous, it's immediate, it's here now. In the play of life, it plays out in time, right? We know in the truth of the eternal here now that there is no time, that we are the timeless being. And so in a way, the lived experience is winding up time. It's winding up space. It's refining time and space into a holistic lived knowing of the timeless, eternal, infinite truth of who we are, reality, right? And it takes, in the play of time, as long as it takes. Because the knowing is that the eternal, infinite wholeness is already eternal, infinite wholeness. And the playing out of the evolution of consciousness through the dance of humanity is all part of the whole moving within itself. And that part is not explainable in a way that can be understood. And the fact that it cannot be explained is a perfection because it invites surrender. If it could be explained for the mind to understand, then surrender wouldn't happen. If the mind could have everything it wants, then it would stay alive. But the mind is not an entity that is separate from the whole. And the reason the mind can't get it, can't have it, that you can't grasp, is purely because it has to surrender into the one. And so this whole unfolding is really about surrender into the one. It's like a Ma, Divine Mother Sharanam. It's taking refuge, taking shelter in the divine wholeness, the light, taking refuge in the one. Before there can be a complete knowing of that one, it's about this Sharanagati, being the one that surrenders into the one and then is nourished by being in a living surrender. Being the one that is in surrender to the one is this flow of surrender, this flow of perpetual surrender that is life, that is Shakti, right? And that we're carried by the flow of Shakti and our knowing of the being in the silence. We're carried by this into the gyroscopic wholeness of divine wholeness. And divine wholeness would maybe be called pure divinity or the Parabrahman. It would bring us to a gyroscopic wholeness where wholeness is whole, is whole, is whole, is whole, right? Never divided, never dimmed, never challenged or changed in any way. It's a wholeness that is ever whole. And this wholeness that is ever whole is pure peace, true peace. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Right. Mm.